I'm Kyla and welcome back to the Infinite Library, and today we're going to be doing the next installment in my Rereading My Old Favourites series. And this was a little bit different. It's not one I really thought I was going to do, but if you were a kid in like the 90s, early 2000s in the UK, you can't have not heard of Jacqueline Wilson. She wrote a metric ton, basically, of like middle grade, early teen books, some of them are. And I absolutely devoured like so many of them when I was younger. I loved her books so much. And they were very much a part of my childhood. Like, I reread these books so often that I like was word perfect on some of the parts. I didn't love all of them, I've got to say, but there were some that really stuck with me, and I haven't really thought about them much in years. And then it turns out that Jacqueline Wilson is bringing out what I believe is her first adult book this September, and it is a book that takes place closing off, I assume. I don't know if she's going to write more in the series, but it's closing off the Girls series. The series was a 4-book series titled Girls, but it had 4 books. It was Girls in Love, Girls Under Pressure, Girls Out Late, and Girls in Tears. And these came out around the time that I was still very much in love with Jacqueline Wilson, but also towards the time when I started to fall away from reading her books. But these were books that I found a little to be somewhat problematic, but I also loved them and reread them so much. They were probably some of my first introduction to like teen romance kind of stuff. Obviously by an author that I read so much. So they always had a special place in my heart. And there was a TV series as well that I also remember watching and really liking, even though they changed quite a lot. But I think I actually like a lot of the changes, come to think of it. But now, out of the blue, we are getting a book called Think Again, and it's set, I think, 30 years or so after the end of the Girls series. So in the Girls series, the girls are 13 to 14 years old in high school, going through very sort of typical teen kind of stuff. And now we're going to Think Again, and this is a book that is still following our protagonist Ellie, but now she's a single mother with her daughter of her own, and we're going to be following what's going on in her life, I guess. And I assume she's still going to be best friends with the 2 girls in the Girls in Love series too. And I'm just really excited to see what she's going to do with them. I'm excited to revisit these characters after so many years. And it kind of seemed like it was a good idea for me to revisit that series after having not read it in so long. But I kind of want to read more. So I'm actually going to pick up a couple of different books by Jacqueline Wilson that were books that really resonated with me, and I want to revisit them and see if they kind of hold up or not, because these are basically middle grade and I'm not the target audience for this anymore, and I don't know if they're really going to hold up or not. Like, obviously these are so rooted in like 90s Britain. All of them are basically about kids going through some kind of issues, but they're usually very funny and very light-hearted, and they do deal with some heavy themes, but never really to the point, from what I remember, that was like too much. So yeah, I'm just intrigued to see how these hold up. So I think the books that I'm going to be reading, I will obviously be rereading all 4 of the girls' books to prepare for Think Again coming out. I'm going to read Double Act, which was probably my favourite when I was younger. I don't know if it would be my favourite now. I feel like it's a story that hasn't stuck with me. So I picked a couple of others as well that I think the stories really have stuck with me. One of these is the Lottie Project. It is about a girl that's like learning about the Victorians, and the story is kind of split between her life and her writing this diary of this Victorian woman who was like very reminiscent of her. I remember loving that one. I'm also going to read Bad Girls, which is one I hear nobody ever talking about, but I really loved that one. It's about this girl who gets bullied and she ends up making this friend who's like very cool, and it kind of helps her out, but then some stuff happens. So yeah, those are the main ones that I think I'm gonna pick up. I might pick 1 or 2 others up as well, but I'm just gonna see what's available and what I'm feeling, really. But I'm definitely going to be picking at least those 7, I think. are my main aim. They're all middle grade, so they're all very quick reads. But yeah, I'm gonna pick those up. I might try and check out some of like the adaptations as well, because I'd love to revisit the Girls series because I remember really liking that. And I know there's other stuff out there as well. Like, I watched them with the Tracy Beaker series, which I was never very keen on Tracy Beaker, which feels like sacrilege as a Jacqueline Wilson reader, but I just wasn't. She was not my type of character whatsoever. So that is the intention of this project. Also, Jacqueline Wilson herself is actually going to be doing like a book launch kind of thing at the library in the city where I live. So I'm actually going to be able to go and like, I met her once before at a book signing for Dustbin Baby, but it's obviously been a very long time. So I'm hoping she'll do a signing at this event and I'll be able to like meet her, and it'll just be really interesting to go to an event and hear her talk after so long and like revisiting this series. So yeah, that is the intention of this project. I'm really looking forward to going back to these like old books and seeing what works about them, seeing if they even still do work, because it was such an era, like 90s Britain, and you know, this is so long ago now, and I really don't know if they're going to hold up or not. So let us go and find out together, I guess. Okay, so we are starting the first book of this little vlog, and I'm going to start with the Lottie Project. This is one that I'm incredibly nostalgic for. I remember it definitely being one of my favourites back in the day, so I'm really just excited to read this, honestly. I think compared to some of the others that I'm not sure I'm gonna like in a reread, I kind of think this one's gonna hold up. I just had a very brief like look through and I was like, oh, the pictures are still so nostalgic for me. I forgot how expressive and how memorable the illustrations are in these books. I will tell you what this one is about. So essentially it is about a girl called Charlie who is having to do a like history project, and she has to do it about the Victorians. This is a middle grade book. She is 11 years old and she ends up writing about this girl called Charlotte, I believe, who was very much like her, but what her life would have been like in Victorian times. And Charlotte is a maid. She's like a nursemaid essentially to a bunch of kids from what I remember. And I can't remember exactly what the deal is, whether she is kind of writing this made up diary that she thinks that Lottie's life would have been like, or if she's found this diary and she's reading it and she's like seeing these similarities between them. But yeah, I remember really liking it. It was very different from one of Jacqueline Wilson's books because it's less about contemporary stuff, which is kind of what she does best. So it's a pretty short book. I think it sits at 200 or so pages, so I imagine it's going to be a very quick read. And yeah, I'm not used to how shiny this new edition is. My old edition, I'll put a picture of it here of what the original looked like. It's similar kind of picture, but definitely different in terms of not having foil. This is like a this is like a chocolate wrapper. So yeah, I'm gonna start this and I will update you once I'm a little bit further in and have something else to tell you about it. Also, one last update I forgot to mention, but I just checked my Goodreads and I originally rated Lottie Project a 4-star. So I'm kind of hoping it'll still be a 4-star. We will see. Okay, so quick update before I head out to work. I started the Lottie Project last night. I am about 62 pages in, so I want to say about a third of the way through, and I'm really enjoying it actually. I was a bit worried that because this is to middle grade it was going to be too young for me to read, but actually it's so readable. I'm really enjoying the characters, the illustrations are just perfect, and yeah, I'm having a good time with it. Basically, for some reason I thought that, from what I remember Jacqueline Wilson books, a lot of her main characters are just very kind of flat, but she has a lot of personality, Charlie. She's a lot more like 3-dimensional, I suppose, than what I seem to remember. Like, I feel like often Jacqueline Wilson's protagonists tend to fall into 2 types of characters. So they're usually always female protagonists, and they're usually always like the kind of like the shy, insecure girl, or they're like the bullshit kind of, as she calls herself in this, snotty girl, and Charlie falls into the latter category of that. And I'm really appreciating like the whole thing where it's like showing how she's in a local income family and how her and her mother are still kind of making the best of it and still kind of finding that joy between them. Also really enjoying all the instances of Lottie as well. I was wrong. It isn't that we're also hearing Lottie's story in the past, it's that Charlie is writing Lottie's story, so there's kind of like similarities between the two, but she's really like writing her well. I'm super impressed, to be honest, and Lottie is a really engaging character as well. So yeah, I'm having a good time with it. I'll update once I'm further in. Hello! So I'm coming at you from the same angle, but I can assure you that actually a whole day has passed since my last update. I've also not been very well this week, so if my last update was kind of messy and all over the place, it's because I was in a lot of pain. So I don't know exactly how coherent I was. I guess I'll find out in editing. But I'm coming at you with an update because I have indeed finished the Lottie Project. And I really enjoyed this one. I ended up deciding to actually keep this at the original rating that I rated it at when I was younger, so it's still a 4-star for me. I'm trying not to be too objective with these because they are nostalgia reads. I'm going to be biased. But I had a really good time with this. It's funny because on the back it talks basically about how she's complaining about how her mum's awful boyfriend is kind of like in it. And I kind of thought he was going to show up way earlier, but he doesn't show up until like halfway through. But yeah, this one was really touching. There's a lot of like emotional stuff in there because essentially there's a little boy who her mother looks after and he ends up going missing at one point, and Charlie's kind of been mean to him and she blames herself for it. And she really goes through it. Like, this is probably the most emotion. This is more emotion than I expected to find in this book, quite honestly. Like, she really, really thought that like she was to blame for this boy going missing and thought he was going to die, and it was really good though. I enjoyed this one a lot. So I am going to get into spoilers for a little bit now about the story itself. So if you don't want to hear spoilers about this book, please skip to whatever number I put on the screen here, and then you won't have to hear any more details about the story itself. But I do want to get a little bit more into the story, just to kind of discuss some of the themes. It's something else which I'd never seen before. I don't know if this was included in any of like the originals, but it has like this little thing at the beginning, and it's actually from the author herself, and she's talking kind of about why she was inspired to do this. And basically she says, when my daughter Emma was little, she was passionately interested in the Victorians. She begged me to play Victorian imaginary games with her. She always wanted to be the lady of the house. I was generally the servant girl. I had to curtsy to her and say, "Yes, my lady," and do whatever she commanded. You can see why Emma loved this game. When she got older, I read Victorian books aloud to her, while she drew endless pictures of Victorian ladies with bustles and button boots. We wrote a series of letters to each other pretending to be Victorian schoolgirls. Emma wrote a long family saga herself called The Treadwells. It was much better than anything I could have written at age 9 or 10. Because of Emma's enthusiasm for the Victorian age, I'd imagine that most children would find it an interesting period in history. When I go into schools to give talks, I'd often see pictures of Queen Victoria pinned up on the wall above a special display of Victorian objects, white 90s and long drawers and washboards and blue medicine bottles and jet jewellery. "Oh, you're doing the Victorians this term, you lucky things," I'd exclaim. The children would nearly always wrinkle their noses at me in astonishment. We hate the Victorians, they're so boring. So I got it into my head to write about a girl who thinks doing her Victorian project is going to be intensely boring. The working title of my story was Doing the Victorians. Yuck. I decided that my Charlie would invent a very similar girl to herself living in late Victorian times. This Lottie had to go out to work as a nursery maid, and as Charlie does her research, you can compare and contrast their lives. Most children will read the story to find out more about Charlie and her mum, and see how Charlie copes when mum gets a new boyfriend. Charlie even gets a kind of boyfriend herself. I disagree with that, but here we go. But it would be wonderful if just a few readers get interested in the Lottie section and decide that maybe the Victorians aren't so boring after all. And I remember when I read this when I was younger, the Lottie sections were my favourite. They're unfortunately a lot shorter than the actual Charlie sections. They're just kind of like brief little vignettes going through, and a lot of what happens in Lottie's sections, as well as sort of like giving a good kind of idea of what life was like for someone as a young girl working as a servant in Victorian times, a lot of it does echo kind of what's happening in Charlie's own life as she's sort of like filtering it through into her project, essentially. She's kind of like a nursemaid for a bunch of children, and when the little boy goes missing in her life, the baby also goes missing in Lottie's life. Although Lottie's kind of... she blames herself, I think, but it's not as bad as how Charlie blames herself. But yeah, they were really interesting. I still really enjoyed those portions, and I still wish those portions were longer, to be honest. But I actually really enjoyed Charlie's portions as well. I thought her character development was really good in this book. Like, she kind of starts off and she's very kind of know-it-all, and she's very harsh to everyone around her. It feels like she's got this very narrow view of people around her. It's very black and white of boys are bad, these girls are my best friends, and even though I find them kind of annoying sometimes, but it's okay because I'm the best. And she kind of goes through this like growing thing throughout it where she realises how she can be in the wrong sometimes, and she learns to appreciate people that maybe she didn't appreciate. Like when she first meets this little kid, Robin, who's going through a tough time, her mother is babysitting him, she kind of just thinks he's really wimpy and stuff, and then she actually gets really attached to him, and the kid gets really attached to her as well, and it's really sweet because they form this like little sibling relationship. I don't ever think her relationship with her friends necessarily improved, except for the fact that she messed up really badly with them, and then she realised how badly she'd messed up and she apologised to them and asked them to be friends with her. But she'd always kind of took it for granted beforehand that they were the ones who wanted to be friends with her, not necessarily the other way around. She was like, everyone loves me, I'm the best in the class. And she gets her like whole worldview really shaken up when all this thing happens, because she realises that she's kind of been horrible to a lot of people, and even though she has this view of herself, she realises it doesn't match up anymore, and she actually takes a lot of self-reflection. Another thing I really liked with this is that because she gets herself very interested in the Victorian stuff herself, even though she doesn't really want to do anything to do it, and she doesn't want to have anything to do with it at the beginning. She ends up kind of forming a friendship with this other boy who she previously hated, because they both kind of have this shared love of the history. And that was nice how they developed this friendship, and she kind of broadens her worldview essentially. But one of the things I really liked was that through her doing this project, she kind of like found a love of doing something creative, because she started to bake and she was really enjoying it, like, and it kind of becomes her thing. That it's one of the ways that she kind of like expresses herself to other people, is that she bakes cakes. And she goes into a great deal decorating them and stuff, and I thought that was really nice because she's very much portrayed as like this tomboy, bullshit sort of character, and then I kind of liked that she kind of found herself drawn to this thing that was so like seen as feminine, I guess. So yeah, really good. I really liked this one a lot. I can't remember if it was my favourite back in the day. I think it probably was my favourite next double act, I think. But I'm going to move on now, I think, and I'm going to start the Girls series, which I know I'm going to have possibly a difficult time with, because even back in the day when they came out, I was getting towards the end of me not really being as interested in Jacqueline Wilson books anymore, and I found them problematic back then when I was like in my early teens, so I can already tell some of the topics I'm gonna find problematic as well. But I'm hoping that I can kind of see it through like a lens glass where I'm like, this was kind of what it was like back in like the late 90s, early 2000s and stuff. But happy to say that this one does indeed still hold up quite well. So yeah, one book down. Hello, so it's been a couple of weeks since my last update, and I've read another book since then. I've read Girls in Love by Jacqueline Wilson. Really different colours they've now got. They used to be this like really hot pink, very tweeny kind of books, I guess. I don't mind it. I can see how it kind of makes it look a bit more appealing to pick up, especially if you're a bit older. So I was a bit worried going into this one, just because I remember having a hard time with these books. I remember I did like them, but I think the more I reread them, the more issues I found with them. And I honestly don't remember a whole lot about what happened in this book, other than this whole thing with how one of the girls gets a boyfriend who's much older than her. Actually, I quite liked it. It was not as problematic as I thought it was going to be, shockingly. It follows these three girls called Ellie, Nadine and Magda, who are all good friends. We see this from Ellie's perspective, who is kind of like the one that just isn't like, compared to Nadine and Magda, she's always comparing herself to them and not seeing herself as good, like, because she's, like, not really skinny, and she's, like, got frizzy hair and, like, granny glasses, and she's always comparing herself to them. Nadine is, like, a goth girl, and Magda is kind of, like, the hot girl at school, basically, so they're kind of, like, an odd bunch, but they just get on really well. And in this, basically, Nadine and Magda both get, like, boyfriends, and Ellie kind of makes up that she's got a boyfriend with this boy who she met when she was on holiday, but it actually isn't that bad. Like, I'm usually a bit not happy with kind of like storylines where people lie and stuff, but like she actually does meet this boy called Dan, and they actually have this like nice friendship together. It doesn't necessarily bloom into romance, but she genuinely like does get on with him, and they kind of like have this connection, and she does like, it doesn't really end up being a big deal that she's lying to her friends because they're actually so involved with what's going on with their own things. It doesn't really come across as like too bad, and then she does like kind of tell them, and it's not a big deal. But yeah, it was a fun book. The stuff with Nadine was definitely kind of heavy, stuff that, you know, you've kind of seen before for sure, but I think it was done in quite a good way, to be honest. Like this whole thing with how, to say we only see it from Ellie's perspective, basically, you know, this older boy is with Nadine generally because she's young, and it makes it quite clear, and thankfully she does realise and come to her senses and isn't with him before anything too bad really happens. Like, she's really hurt by it, obviously, because she really liked him, but he was kind of pressuring her to sleep with him, but thankfully she does not. And as soon as like it's obvious that she isn't going to, he just kind of like is completely done with her, which is disgusting, really. But yeah, I was a bit worried about that kind of thing because I think that it can be very heavy in teen books, and I think it can also not be done very well, but I was pleasantly surprised it was actually done very well. I also found this book just to be very fun in general. Like, there was a lot going on that I completely forgot about. Like, Ellie has like a kind of a complicated relationship with her stepmother, but actually they get on quite well, which is not what you often see, to be honest, in these kind of teeny books. And there was a lot of stuff about how she missed her mother had died when she was younger, and how she has a little brother, and just like general stuff. Like, she has a lot of complex about how she looks, which I know is going to come into it a big way in the second book, where she does unfortunately develop an eating disorder, and I know that's going to be a rough book to get through because I didn't like that book even back then. So again, I'm a bit worried about the second book, but genuinely I had a good time with this book. Like, the characters are really likable. There's like little art pieces which are super cute, and it does this thing throughout where like she's kind of she's picking like favourite things for each chapter. It's like going up with each chapter. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4. So for chapter 9, for example, she's like talking about like her 9 favourite things. And it's just really cute because it's got these little like pictures in, and it's just a nice touch, honestly. Like, it's the kind of thing you would always do when you were like a teen yourself, is like writing lists and you know, counting downs of things. And so yeah, it was actually really realistic, and yeah, I gotta say I really liked it. Unexpectedly so. So yeah, I'm waiting for the next book to come in at the library, which I believe is called Girls Under Pressure. And all I remember about that one is that Ellie develops an eating disorder, and it's quite heavy with that. I don't remember what happens with any of the other characters at all, so I guess I'll find out, and yeah, I'll check in again once I've got the second book. So, update time. I have read the second book in the Girls series by Jacqueline Wilson, Girls Under Pressure. I don't have this physically, unfortunately. I actually read it via audiobook, which I wasn't sure I'd enjoy. I feel like the narrator feels very old, to be honest, to be doing like a teen book. But I was travelling back from Chimera, and I was like really tired eyes, and I just didn't really feel like picking up like a physical book to read. So I had the audiobook for Girls Under Pressure. So I ended up just like throughout the 4-hour journey listening to the whole thing and finished it all in one go. And I was pleasantly surprised again, because this was the book that I was the most anxious about, because it deals with eating disorders, and I feel like that was I feel like it was a bit of a trigger for me back then, and I feel like it could be a bit of a trigger even more so now, and I was just worried about how heavy it was going to be. It was another reason why I was like, I might audiobook this, because I feel like it will go better and it'll go faster than if I read it physically and was like as in my head about it. And actually on a reread, it was definitely still very heavy with what was going on, and like there are very uncomfortable elements, but I felt it was dealt with a lot better than I remember it. There's a lot of other stuff going on as well as what is happening with Ellie. She obviously does develop an eating disorder. Her friend is kind of getting into modeling, and there's some stuff to do with that. And Magda, basically the whole book is about appearance and how people treat you based on your appearance in different ways. So we've got Nadine, who is seen as like this striking beauty and kind of gets into modeling and then kind of sees what it's really like, and then Magda, who's seen as like really sexy and how boys treat her because of that. And then Ellie develops a complex, which she always kind of had, but it really goes into a big thing in this book, and she does develop an eating disorder because she believes that if she were thinner like her friends, she could, you know, do better. Which we've all had that experience, I think. You know, I struggle with like my size, my weight as well. I am not someone who can diet easily, so I just try to exercise a lot and I try to eat healthily. But I am unfortunately someone, particularly because I do have chronic pain and health issues, that I struggle to keep weight off. So that is kind of relatable to me, but it wasn't as like depressing as I thought it was going to be. I felt it actually dealt with it quite well. There was a lot of like objectivity to it. Ellie herself didn't spiral as much as I seem to remember she spiraled. I really thought that the whole, when she was like a bit delusional and when she was so in her like eating disorder thing where she was like bulimic and stuff, that was like a lot of the book, and actually it isn't. She has a lot of like going back and forth where she kind of like realizes that this is silly, that there are more things to her than like her weight, that she really isn't like as overweight as she thinks she is. Like, there are some, like, yeah, she basically really struggles a lot, I think, with, like, body dysmorphia, which I can relate to. So, yeah, I can't say I enjoyed this book. It definitely still had elements that were quite uncomfortable at times, but it was definitely nowhere near as problematic or as depressing and heavy as I remember it being. I still rated it about 3. It's probably still my least favourite of the girls series because I just don't like the subject matter. But honestly, for the time, I think it did a reasonably good job of portraying like eating disorders and having a satisfactory outcome to it. And like it is clear throughout the rest of the series that like Ellie is never truly over it. She doesn't just like click and she's fine with her body image. She still struggles. But she remembers to remind herself that what things really are and not get stuck in that thought spiral. So yeah, it wasn't a great book, but it was better than I remember it being in terms of how it dealt with the really dark issues. So that is that one. I do have the next book in the series, Girls Out Late. I think I remember quite liking this one. This is the one where Ellie does actually get a boyfriend. I can't remember what else goes on with this. I feel like this might be where this whole thing happened, where the girls get like stuck with some older boys and it gets very like, yeah, not a great situation they get stuck in for a little bit. But yeah, so I remember liking this one, and then there's one more book after this, which is Girls in Tears, and I remember not liking that one so much because there's like a whole cheating element that comes in, which I just didn't enjoy. For me, I always felt that the main trilogy was like the core series, and then I didn't like the 4th book, and I didn't really think it was that much of the main series, to be honest. So yeah, I will be reading this one next, most likely. I still have Bad Girls to read, and I have Double Act back there as well, but this one has a reserve on it already, so I'm probably gonna go with this one next. And I actually can't find a physical copy in the library anywhere for Girls in Tears, so I think I'm gonna audiobook that one as well. And I think, like with the second book, because I don't really like the storyline as much, for the 4th book, I think an audiobook might be a better way to go in terms of just getting it read quickly. So yeah, that is my update. Again, wasn't as bad as I remembered. So positive update, I guess. I'll check in with you once I've read, or at least started, Girls Out Late. You know what's really annoying? Doing a whole rant review and then losing the video. So I actually have read Girls Out Late, sorry, is the 3rd book in the Girls series. I read this maybe a month and a half, 2 months ago now, and I don't know what happened to that footage. It has gone to the ever. So you're not going to see my very big vent I did about it. So I'll just spark notes this for you, basically. As you probably guessed, I did not like this book. I remember quite liking this one a lot, funnily enough, when I used to read this one. And it's funny because going into this like reading vlog, the books I was most like not sure about and thought were going to be the most problematic was the second book, Girls Under Pressure, which I liked more than I remember liking, and the final book, Girls in Tears. And I seem to remember that I really liked Girls Out Late. On a reread, however, I did not like this book whatsoever. I want to say I rated this a 2? Possibly a 2. It may have just pipped a 3. But the main reason why I did not like this book is Russell. Basically, he is the guy who Ellie develops a relationship with. He is a boy who is a couple of years older than her at all boys high school, and they sort of like have this little meet cute in McDonald's where it turns out they're both artists and they've been sketching each other, and it's supposed to be this really cute thing, but I hate him so much. He is very pushy. The whole relationship just squicks me out a little bit. Like, the age difference I don't like. Like, I understand it's kind of normal for girls in high school to be dating guys who are a bit older. Like, it's a very cool thing for them to be doing. But the fact that Ellie at this point in time, I think, is still 13 and he is maybe 16 or 17 really squicks me. And he makes it very clear that he is sexually interested in Ellie. And, like, literally on their first date, like, they end up going to this park and she's supposed to have like a curfew, hence the Girls Out Late kind of thing, and she ends up being really late back because he's trying to like push her further in the romance than she feels comfortable. And like, good on Ellie, she does push back and she doesn't like do anything that she's too uncomfortable with, but I just hated that whole scene. And throughout the whole book, it feels like Russell is such a dickhead, quite honestly. Like, he complains to Ellie so easily. Like, he gets annoyed because she's talking about other things in her life that mean a lot to her, like her friends, and it's just very frustrating to see. And he gets this whole bee in his bonnet basically because like he wanted her to go to this like prom or something at his place, and he's just like, oh, I want to show you off because you're my girlfriend. It ends up clashing with being on the same date as this show, a concert basically by like the girl's favourite singer, and she ends up choosing to go to that instead, which rightfully so. And then there's a whole thing that happens basically where it turns out the concert gets cancelled because the singer is having romantic issues. And there's this really horrible, awkward scene where the three girls, mostly because of Nadine, still struggling from her relationship breakup from Liam and like thinking that she is not attractive, feeling a certain amount of jealousy because Ellie now has a boyfriend and Nadine doesn't. They end up like going with these like really shady guys back to their apartment. They're doing drugs. It's very obvious what they want to do to the girls, and they're so clearly underage. And thankfully they do manage to get away, but that whole scene, I remember being so anxious reading when I was young, and it's still so anxiety inducing. So yeah, I had a lot of issues with this one. And like, honestly, the whole thing with the guys was like one thing, but like, I remember not liking that back in the day, but I remember liking Russell, and I don't know why I liked Russell, because that boy is a waste of space. When you get to my review of the next book, you will again see me being very angry about Russell. I just really hate him as a character. I hate their relationship. I don't think... no, I'm just not here for it. The one positive I have to say about this book is that we got a really good arc, funnily enough not for Ellie, but for Nadine. Because basically she finds out that this girl who is like Liam's next target, and everyone thinks that like she's being stupid and she's trying to get back with Liam, and it turns out actually she's trying to help this girl. And I really loved seeing that side of Nadine, like seeing her helping this girl and like not letting her make the same mistake that she did, and I loved that, and it was the only thing I loved about this book, to be honest. So yeah, that is my review, I guess, of Girls in Love. Yeah, it did not at all live up to what I remember about it, and I really hope we don't get Russell back in Think Again. I really hate him as a character. I just want him gone. Hello, so I'm coming up to you with the last update in me reading the Girls series. I did indeed read the last book, Girls in Tears, quite recently. I listened to it by audiobook again because even though I don't really like the audiobook narrator, this was another book that I was a bit like, I don't think I'm going to enjoy it, and it would just get me through it faster. Also, you can't get the physical copy in like my local libraries at all. You can only get it digitally, and I'm just like, well, if I'm gonna have to read it digitally, I may as well just get the audiobook. So that's what I did. And I am very sad to say that I hated this. I didn't really enjoy the third book that much either, which introduced Russell, and Russell is such an issue in this book. So the final book is called Girls in Tears, which, great title. Yeah, I really hated it, I have to say. Of all these books that I read, I gave this one a 2 star overall. This one did not hold up for me at all. Like, originally I think I rated it a 3 star, and upon rereading I was like, no, that is a 2 star. I just hated everything about it, honestly. The storyline was so bad. I hated the relationship between Ellie and Russell. It felt so toxic. Ellie basically ends up getting into a fight with her friends quite early on in the book, so she is lonely and depressed for a lot of the book. And there's this like little subplot where she is kind of like entering an art competition, or basically her boyfriend Russell has already entered the competition and didn't tell her about it because they're both artists, presumably because he felt threatened by her. And he ends up using like her character, and there's this whole thing about like originality in artists and that kind of thing, and basically like she's really upset, although she tries not to show it to him, that he's basically used her character and submitted it as a competition. And then there's a whole thing where like she tries to enter the competition and she uses a character that was like something that her mother used to tell her about in stories when she was young. And I hated that everyone ganged up on her when she did that, including her father, and I thought that was horrible. And basically saying that, oh, well, you can't say that Russell was in the wrong doing that when you're not being original with yours anyway. And then literally later on, like, some people are just like, oh, well, you made it your own, so it's fine. But I hate that Russell got away with basically stealing her art. Like, that was such a big thing for me. And I feel like he just kind of got away with it, and she was like pissed at him for a bit. And then it was just kind of brushed off at the end, and it was just like, oh, it's fine. And obviously there's a whole thing with basically, spoilers I guess, like Russell ends up accidentally I still think that whole thing is so fishy, like kissing Magda at a party when they're all very upset and drunk, and it just causes so much issues, and it just felt so stupid and juvenile, and I was fully on like Ellie's side for this, and I feel like she should not have forgiven Russell. She should have broken it with Russell, because like aside from the whole thing that happened at the party, which I was like, that's just a silly teen thing, like everything before that, he was just so negative to Ellie, and they were so toxic as a relationship. Like every time that she would like talk about her friends to him, he'd just be like, oh, you're talking about them again. And it was just horrible. Like in this book, it felt like he was only interested in Ellie in terms of furthering their relationship physically, which I also hated. Although I'm glad that Ellie put her foot down about it and was like, no, I'm not ready for this right now. Given that she's like 13 still, and he's like 15, 16 or something. I hated him so much. I hated their relationship. I'm glad that the friendship stuff did get sorted out, but I felt there was just so much pointless miscommunication and depression and upset in the book. And literally, the only good thing I have to say about this book is Ellie's father's development, because he's kind of been an ass throughout this whole series. Like, he is like a teacher, and there's this whole thing about basically, like, obviously he loved Ellie's mother died, and then he ended up marrying one of his students, which is always a little bit, and there's always been this like underlying thing that not only does he always kind of like brush everything off that's kind of important, there's always been this thing in that he kind of treats Anna a little bit like she's a housewife, who's the woman he married and has a kid with, and that he's probably still like doing things like sleeping with his students and indiscretions like that. And that is like a worry that comes to the forefront in this book, and they really think that's what he is doing because he's spending a lot of time like away and out late and coming home late and that kind of thing. And then eventually Ellie finds out, because she just had enough of it basically. She's like, I don't want you to be like hitting Anna anymore, which, by the way, love Ellie and Anna's relationship. I love that like it's a stepmother relationship that is not seen negatively, and it does explore that well in the books. She basically goes to the university where he teaches, and she finds out that no, he is not sleeping with students. He's actually just trying to like get his artistic creativity back, and he's painting, and that's what he's doing. And he's like obviously seen like his daughter is a really good painter, his artist, sorry, and Anna is currently like doing really well successfully in terms of her creating these like patterns for like a jumper business basically. And earlier on in the book, Ellie had basically just been said that like, you know, you're a jealous old man. He was just like, I am. And he says that he wishes he hadn't like basically dropped his creative passions, and he's trying to get it back, but he's like, I'm too old now. And it was actually just a really sad moment, and it was a really nice moment between Ellie and her dad, and her actually kind of understanding her father somewhat, and obviously realizing that he wasn't like cheating on them or anything like that. He was just trying to find himself again. So that was like literally the only good thing I have to say about that book. Otherwise, I absolutely hate it. So I have two more books that I want to read for this video. And they are two quite short ones, and they're two standalones. So I have Bad Girls and I have Double Act. This one I actually own because I managed to find it quite cheap. And this one I kind of want to own, but because I have such like strong like positive memories of this book, but I kind of want to reread it to see if it has stood the test of time. So I'll be reading one of these in the next update, and I kind of want to watch some of the girls' TV show. Like, I don't know if any of you guys knew this, but like they actually did get a TV series, which is really funny because the main girl who plays Ellie, not only does she look nothing like how Ellie looks in the book, by the way, but she's also an actress that I've seen other things, and she's like a very lesbian actress. So it's kind of funny to see her in like this teen role. But I remember really liking the TV series. They like changed up a few things about Nadine and Magda. They made the whole group like a little bit more diverse. And I think they aged them up a little bit as well. I got the feeling they were more like 16 than 13 or so, but I don't really remember very much about the series, but I think I remember actually quite liking it. So yeah, I think I'm going to try watching some of the series and report back as to if it's actually good or if I'm just kind of seeing it through rose-tinted lenses because I liked the series that much at the time. Yeah, these are the two that I'm hoping I will still really like, so we'll see, I guess. My faith is a little bit shaken after my reread of the Girls series, so we'll see. Okay, so I have another update because I've read another Jacqueline Wilson book. I finally got around to reading Bad Girls, and I still really enjoyed this one, I have to say. This one has this really fun gimmick that I remember really loving when I was little. And like essentially you see how there's like a rainbow and it's got all these crayons. Every single chapter in this book is kind of labelled after a different colour in the rainbow. So we've got red and orange, yellow, that kind of thing, all the way through until the last chapter is called Rainbow. And I really like that, and I just thought it was very fun, basically. And like obviously each chapter like links to the colour in some kind of way. But this one was really good. I remember finding our main character Mandy to be kind of like frustrating, I think, when I was younger, but I do think she's quite accurate to someone her age. Like, she's only 10 and she's basically been brought up by her parents who are like very traditional. They're a lot older than most other parents of the other kids at her school, and she's basically been brought up extremely sheltered and in a way that very much she is growing, and she kind of wants to be seen as cool and more grown up, and she's kind of like figuring out her own identity basically. But her mother is just like dressing her up like a little girl, like with the plaits. Everything is like cute and pink, and she has little bunnies and that kind of thing, and she hates it. And she gets bullied by at school by these three girls here, one of whom used to be her best friend, but now she has no best friends and she just gets bullied, so she's a horrible time. But she ends up by happenstance meeting this girl called Tanya, who's a few years older than her, and like basically like the cool girl that she's always wanted to be, and they just hit it off straight away. Like they have this really sweet relationship where Tanya basically sees Mandy as like her younger sister, but there is issues later on because essentially Tanya has come from like a troubled background, and whilst they're out and about she's like shoplifting, and Mandy gets really upset about it because she's afraid about getting caught, and Tanya's like, it's okay, I'm mostly shoplifting just stuff to give you as gifts and stuff, but she's like, I won't do it anymore if it upsets you. And then she does do it once more because she gets upset because someone is being really demeaning to her in a shop and they get caught. So I remember being really sad about this when I was younger because Tanya has basically taken away. She has to go through juvenile court, but thankfully it does work out and she gets put in like a new foster situation, I believe. And it is a bittersweet ending because you never really know if things work out with Tanya. I feel like she shows up in like another book at some point. I can't remember, but I think that was mentioned somewhere. And Tanya's like a really lovable character as well. Like she is genuinely like quite a sweet girl, and you can really see when she gets upset and why she shoplifts a little bit, because a lot of it is about her just trying to push back at the world who is being very judgmental and mean to her. So I kind of get where, not that I'm advocating it, but like I get her essentially. Like I understand why she acts out in certain ways. And overall, yeah, I really liked this. I think weirdly I might like it more as an adult because I think the ending is more realistic in how Mandy just ends up starting to be able to talk back to her parents, be able to stand up for herself, and they actually do sort of acknowledge that she has a point in some ways and that she should be allowed to have more independence in her life and how she looks and that kind of thing. And she just gets to this point where after everything that's happened with Tanya, she just doesn't care about what the bullies say to her anymore because she knows that like she is lovable basically, because Tanya made her feel that way. So that was a really nice thing, and like it kind of like has this like bittersweet ending where it's like Tanya writes to her saying they'll hopefully see each other again. It's kind of like you never find out if they do, but you kind of hope they do. And I remember not liking that ending and finding it very dissatisfying, but actually now I can kind of appreciate it. Another thing I really liked was that basically like because this like happens towards the end of a school year and then over the summer, and when Mandy comes back to school after the summer and they have this like new teacher, like they've tried to like nip bullying in the bud basically at the school before, but it's just made things worse. And then they have this new teacher and she kind of starts this like circle time thing where they talk about issues, and it does kind of make it clear that the bullies are people who are hurting too, and that they're actually very silly people to be bullying, and like it takes away the power from the bullies, and then that kind of dissolves that kind of like the little mean friendship that these little girls have, and yeah, they don't bully anymore basically, because they've been shamed. But yeah, it was a very quick read. I read this, like started it like before bed and then I finished it on my lunch break the next day, so it's a very quick read. It's definitely on the younger side compared to some of Jacqueline Wilson's books, but I still think one that does kind of hold up. So that means I only really have Double Act next, which is the one I've been like putting off because I have such fond memories of it. But I also found The Illustrated Mum the other day at charity shop for £1, so I thought, oh, I'll pick it up. Because this was one that I also had like a mixed feelings with, and I remember really liking this one, but also having issues because it's a lot more kind of like complicated in terms of a lot of what this is about the mother's mental health. Essentially this is about this mother, and she has two teenage daughters. One is a bit younger and like she just thinks her mum's really cool, and then she has like an actual teenage daughter who is very like not keen on her mum and doesn't like how she looks and how she doesn't look like other mums, because like she like wears a lot of makeup, she kind of dresses like a teenager still, she has tattoos, that kind of thing. This is very cool at the back here, like it shows like all the meanings of all the different tattoos that she has, and like she gave the kids very hippie names and that kind of thing. And I remember a lot of it being about like the younger daughter thinks her mum is magical, and then it becomes clear later on that her mum is struggling with her mental health, and it was very heavy, I think. So I might try and read this as well if I have time, but we'll see. Also, I've been looking up like all the different adaptations that came up with Jacqueline Wilson stuff, because I remember reading watching some of the TV series that was adaptation of The Girls. I think it was called Girls in Love, and really liking it. It was very different from the books, and it was like geared to an older age. I think like they were definitely more like around 16 in how they looked rather than like the 13, 14 that the books are. But I really want to like try and get some of those old episodes and rewatch them and see what they're like. I've also been looking into other adaptations that came out that I never saw. Like I did see, which is probably the most popular one, is the Story Tracy Beaker TV series, but I was never that keen on that. I never really liked Tracy as a character. I never really liked the books that much, which is why you're not seeing them in this video, even though I feel like for most people, like Jacqueline Wilson is synonymous with Tracy Beaker, but I just never really liked the Tracy Beaker books. I just didn't like her as a character. She was always like so cheeky. I just never warmed to her, essentially. But so I'm looking at other adaptations. It turns out there is like a TV film or something for Double Act. So I might try and find this. Most of them are all like, well, these are all like UK books. Most of them are like BBC adaptations of them. So there is also a series for the Illustrated Mom, I believe, that I may also try and check out. So yeah, I brought my like notes over on my laptop just because I can't quite remember. But yeah, basically those were the ones I think I'm going to try and check out. For those curious, the Tracy Beaker series aired around 2002 to 2006, but it also got like a whole bunch of like spin-offs and sequels and stuff, which I never checked out, obviously, because I wasn't keen on the original one. The Girls in Love series aired between 2003 and 2005. Then they did the Double Act film, which was 2001. And then there was a mini-series for Illustrated Mom, which was 2003, so they're all quite old now. I'm likely going to have a hard time trying to track them down, to be honest. But I kind of want to try and track down at least the Girls in Love episode, because I remember really liking it, and just like I didn't know that there were adaptations of Double Act and Illustrated Mom, so that's just like really intrigued me, because I would have loved to have seen them when I was that age. I realised as well, because obviously in this video I'm just kind of like picking and choosing a couple of my favourites from Jacqueline Wilson, but I haven't really talked that much about all the books that I have read by her, and I have read quite a lot. Like I dropped off, I'd say around the early 2000s is when I stopped. I kind of grew out of her books, so I haven't read any of her recent books at all really. So when Think Again comes out, that is going to be like the first like new book of hers that I've read since for like 20 years basically. But yeah, for anyone curious, other ones I have indeed read, but I decided not to pick them for this video. We've got a couple that I just deemed as too young, even though some I do have fond memories of. So in that category we've got Buried Alive and Cliffhanger, which were two that I think were aimed more at boys. Like a lot of her books seem to be aimed at girls, but those ones did seem to be aimed at boys, and yeah, they were quite young, I felt. Video Rose, which I remember nothing about, and then two which I actually have really fond memories of, which is The Mum Minder, which was all about this girl who, like, her mum gets ill or something and she has to like look after her kids, like her baby siblings for a week or something, and I remember having fond memories of that one. And Glub Slime, which is actually a fantasy all about this girl, and I think she finds like a wishing toad or something, and it like makes her life crazier basically, and hijinks ensue. But I have really fond memories of that one, but I just thought it was too young for me to try and pick up again and read again. I don't think it would work for me anymore. And then the other books that I read by her, I obviously did read The Story of Tracy Beaker and its sequel, The Dare Game, but I didn't really like either of them. Illustrated Mom, which I may or may not still read in this video. The Suitcase Kid was one that I remember really liking. That really got me a lot as like a kid who had divorced parents. Little Rose, which I remember absolutely nothing about, even though it was a later one that I read. The Bed and Breakfast Star I loved, because basically what happens in that is that like these people get like evicted and they end up staying in like this hotel, like the kids and a bunch of like other people, and a lot of what they do is like it's like food based and all like the amazing food that they have and that kind of thing, and like it ends up going a bit sadder because there's like a fire and stuff. But like all the pictures in that one like really stuck with me, and I have such a fond memory of that one. Then the other ones were the slightly older ones, and these were when I was like beginning to age out basically. So we have Clean Break, which I think was about, I think it was about friends that either didn't get on very well, or it was about parents that had split up and the kids were caught in the middle. I don't really remember it that well. The Diamond Girls, I don't really remember that well. The Worry website, I vaguely remember, and that was a thing again about bullying and stuff. Sleepovers was one about friends, and I think it was like a new friend came into the group and they were trying to like the main character felt like left out and that kind of thing, and it was a whole thing about they used to have sleepovers at each of their houses. Midnight, I remember hitting me right about when I was getting into like my goth phase, so I really liked it for that, but again, I remember nothing about it anymore. I think it was the last one that I bought actually was Midnight. That was the last one that I owned. And then the last two, Vicky Angel was one I remember, which was basically about this girl and her best friend Vicky dies. But it's like her guardian angel is kind of with her for a little while, but she's kind of like bullying her and not wanting her to move on. And then she eventually realizes that like it's really harming her friend, so she helps her move on basically, I think, and she does go away. Finally, Dustbin Baby, which I remember not liking very much, but it was also the only time I ever met the author because they released Dustbin Baby, and the author Jacqueline Wilson, I think I probably lived in Stockport at the time, so there was like an author like event for the launch of the book, so I did go to that. I did meet Jacqueline Wilson, I got Dustbin Baby signed, and then I remember like taking it home because it was a launch and I hadn't read it and I didn't like it very much. I think they made an adaptation of that as well actually, but it is basically about a girl who as a baby was dumped in a dustbin basically, and I think she does get like adopted and stuff, but like it's always this thing that's kind of like been lingering with her that her mum just threw her in a bin basically, so it's about her like kind of finding out about her past and stuff. But yeah, I didn't have great memories of it. So yeah, those are all the Jacqueline Wilson's books that I have read. I feel there's one or two that I may have checked out and I just don't remember. Like I read all of these basically like between the ages of me being like, I don't know, 10 and 13, 14 kind of thing. So definitely on the younger side of things. That is all my updates for now. I will check in either when I watch some things or when I've read Double Act. So I tried to start watching the Double Act movie. It's not good. It's really cringe. So when I was looking this up, I actually thought the Double Act movie was this. Turns out, I think this is like a poster for the theatre play. The actual Double Act movie that aired in like 2002 or something is this. They don't look very much like the twins, obviously, whereas the theatre ones do. And I realised like about 2 minutes into this, I had seen this before, obviously back when I was a kid. And this is really for kids. There's a lot of like silly sound effects. They try and put a lot of the cartoon elements into it. I watched maybe like 10 minutes of it and I was like, I ain't doing this. So I've switched and I'm watching some of the Girls in Love series, which has held up. It's actually pretty damn good. I remember like really liking the cast for this. They were really good together, really charismatic. I love the main actress as well. She's been in like a bunch of other things like Tipping the Velvet. Sugar Rush, she was also known for. Like, she's actually a big lesbian actress, which is really hilarious. They aged them up for this series, and I think it works because it just means that the series itself is a bit more mature and it isn't like as kiddie. So yeah, I'm actually watching some of that and I'm gonna keep watching because I'm just remembering so much just watching it now and I'm having a really good time. So last night I started the final book that I'm going to be reading for this vlog. As much as I want to read The Illustrated Mum as well, I'm running out of time, so I think I'm just going to leave it at Double Act. So this one was probably, I want to say it was my favourite when I was younger. I am just over the halfway point at the moment. I'm just about before where the book takes a big twist. And I'm really enjoying it, I've got to say. This is pretty much as good as I remember. This very much, again, does kind of fall into the thing that Jacqueline Wilson likes to do with her protagonists, in that, but in this case, because we have twins, we have both the bullshit snotty girl twin, which is Ruby, and then we have the shyer, more insecure person who is Garnet. And like the whole thing for this basically is that these two are twins and they're supposed to be identical. They're supposed to do everything together. They obviously love each other a lot. There is basically a whole thing with this that at the beginning they live with their father, who is, the mother has passed away a couple of years ago now, and so they live with their father and their grandmother and they have like a very sort of like happy life. And then their father ends up getting with this woman that he meets called Rose, and she kind of becomes their stepmother, and it changes their whole life. It upturns everything. They end up moving away to like the countryside, leaving their school, and having to go to a new school, and it's a big upheaval for them, and they hate Rose. Although Garnet is kind of like, she's not that bad, but Ruby is very much kind of like, no, we hate her, we have to be evil to her. And the story is split between Ruby and Garnet. They are writing in a diary, but we're seeing mostly more from Ruby, which feels very apt because she is the one that shouts over her twin a lot. And Garnet doesn't really get the chance to write very often. And it's funny, because I remember when I read this book originally, I related so hard to Garnet. Like, the one that couldn't speak up very much. The one that was just kind of going with what her twin said, even though, like, it was clear that it was making her unhappy at times. And it's funny, because on a reread, I like Ruby more. I think she's very fun, and whilst I don't think that she's very self-aware in that she just kind of stamps on Garnet's emotions quite a lot, I know where this is going as well, because the two twins do have a falling out, and I'm just before that bit now, basically, where they're gonna have this big falling out, and they are going to separate for a while and start developing as individual people, basically. And it really allows both of them to blossom, I guess. Like, I almost wish in this is that we would see more from Garnet's perspective, because I feel like I would have loved to have seen her blossoming more, but we see it all from Ruby's perspective, and just we hear about what happens to Garnet, and then we see her again when she returns, and they eventually make up, but they kind of obviously get away from being this we're identical and form their own identities about what they want to do in life, that kind of thing. And yeah, I think this is really solid, honestly. I definitely have the nostalgia goggles on for this, I will say. Like, I think that if I hadn't have read this, this would not kind of work for me as well as it does, but the nostalgia is very strong for me. But I just think it's really interesting how I used to like Garnet the most, and I actually find Ruby to be the more interesting protagonist of the two. And like, it's, yeah, realistically, she is the one that we see the most in this book. Fun thing as well, this is actually illustrated by two different people, because whenever we have Ruby's parts, because they're writing in a diary basically throughout the whole thing, so whenever we get Ruby's parts, we have the Nick Shara illustrations, which is what you kind of see here. When we have Garnet's, we actually change artists, and we have someone called Sue Heap, and like, it's not quite as expressive, it's not quite as fun. And that does kind of work well for her. I don't think I ever realised when I was younger that it was two different artists. I was like, the art looks a bit stranger. But I don't think I realised until reading it now that it's two artists, and each one portrays the twins in their own way. But yeah, I'm really enjoying it. It's obviously a very quick read. I'm probably going to finish it later today. I don't know if I'm going to properly review this. Oh, hey, there's a recipe at the back here. That's funny. It's for gingerbread twins. But yeah, gotta say, this one definitely still holds up to me, at least. Nostalgia goggles are probably on, but I'm enjoying this. And I'm just nearing the bit that I remember really struggling with when I was younger, because I hated when the twins were separated, and I kind of think I'm going to enjoy it this time around. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Double Axe. So hello, so this is the final reading update for this video. I did indeed finish Double Axe, basically like only an hour or so after I filmed my last update, and yeah, I really enjoyed this. Funnily enough, there were some things I really didn't remember as well as I had assumed. Like, there's a whole thing where the two twins have like this separation from each other, and I thought during that time Garnet had actually gone away, and it wasn't. Like, they were literally still in the same house, and it was just for the whole of the summer, and they both kind of split up and went and did other things and kind of found out their own identity a little bit more. And it's only when Garnet is actually leaving at the end of summer that Ruby realises how much is going to miss her, and they make up. But yeah, overall, I really enjoyed this. I probably put this at a 3, high free, I suppose. It's definitely got the nostalgia value for me, but I don't think it necessarily like affected me as emotionally as some of the other books, but still pretty solid. So that is the last book that I'll be reading of the actual nostalgia reads. Think Again actually released today, I think. I've been seeing posts about it coming out, so I'm just waiting for my copy to arrive and then I can get on with that. Very exciting. Look what just arrived! It is here! So exciting! I already cannot wait to pick this up. Pretty sure this is like the first hardback Jacqueline Wilson that I've literally ever had. There you go, Girls Series by Jacqueline Wilson. Yeah, it's about just over 300 pages, although it feels thicker. So yeah, I'm gonna be reading this ASAP, I guess. So I figured for my final update for this video, I should go back to my little love heart shades because they are very applicable. Because I just finished reading Think Again by Jacqueline Wilson, and I have mixed thoughts on this, and given you've already seen me read through the 4 books prior to this, it's probably not going to be surprising. Because of those 4 books, I gave 2 of them 3 stars, and I gave the final 2 of them 2 stars. And this is not as bad as the 2-star books, thankfully. However, it stays around in that 3-star area for me. I really enjoyed some of the things of this book. I found, getting back into Jacqueline Wilson's writing, getting to know Ellie again was very easy. There was lots of nostalgic stuff, which, I loved. I loved getting to see these old characters again and seeing where they were now, but there was also a lot of issues in terms of the plot mostly, which didn't really sit right with me for a lot of this book, unfortunately. So this basically follows Ellie, and we start off literally on the day of her 40th birthday, and it is not going well. Basically, like, everything is going wrong. She's lost her job. Her daughter, who she was planning to meet up with, can't meet her anymore, and it feels like it's just gonna be like, it's a bad omen basically for how she's going into like the next stage of her life. There's definitely some ageism stuff going on here, which is kind of unfortunate given that Jacqueline Wilson is like in her 70s, and there's this whole thing where like Ellie's just turned 40 and she's just basically saying that she's really old and she's over the hill and this kind of thing, and I wasn't crazy on that at all because to me personally, like, 40 isn't really that old. And I don't think it is nowadays considered as being super old, so that was kind of disappointing. Things I've got to say about this. I don't want to get into spoilers, so I am going to try to be as subtle as possible, given this is the final book in a long-running series and a lot has changed. But in terms of the main plot line, it did go down kind of like romance as being one of the main plot lines, but I'm glad it wasn't the only plot line, thankfully. A lot of what this book is about Ellie sort of, now that she no longer has, like, she works as a teacher, but basically she was doing this like cartoonist job, and they end the cartoon, and that is how we end up starting the book basically. And she is trying to basically work out what she wants to do next artistically, and she kind of, a lot of this book is also to do with this project that she's working on to do with elephants, and I really liked that. We get to obviously see her family again, which is great. I really enjoyed seeing particularly how Eggs had grown up and the person that he became. It was really, there were some really good moments between Ellie and her father. Not so much with Anna, but I feel like we got a lot of the Anna stuff in the original series, so I wasn't too upset about that. It wasn't enough of Magda and Nadine to say they are here on the front cover. This just wasn't their story. This was very much all Ellie's story, and we had a little bit of Magda and Nadine kind of put in. They each had their own little subplot each, which was actually very separate from the group as a trio. It was all Ellie helping both of them basically with their own kind of like little character arc thing that was going on. And I thought Magda's was okay. I didn't love Magda's, but I could understand Magda's, and I thought how her and Ellie dealt with her situation was quite sweet, and it was nice to see Magda kind of coming back to herself a little bit by the end of the book. But I really didn't like Nadine's storyline. It just brought it all the way back to book 1 in this series. I will trigger warning by saying there is an abuse storyline for Nadine, and it doesn't ever really get resolved. It's kind of just brushed over. I feel like, and that is kind of how it is for both of their storylines, is that we see some slight progression potentially towards a positive route, more so in Magda's than Nadine's, but they didn't really get very much airtime, which I was kind of sad about because I really wanted to see more of the trio together, and we just didn't really get that, mostly because the storyline was more so focused on the romantic plot to do with Ellie, which I wasn't a fan of. I will tell you that now. So there are actually two romantic subplots of Ellie, technically three, but we're not gonna really mention the third one because it was kind of gross. And the one that takes up the main course of the book, I really hated. It's very icky. It was bad vibes. There were so many red flags, and it just was very repetitive, and it took up so much of the book that I wish could have been devoted to the secondary romantic plotline, because I felt that was a much healthier, more positive plotline, and I just didn't understand why the romance plotline that took up the main part of the book was the main part of the book, because it was just very frustrating. Unfortunately, I'm not going to say anything about who that was with, but yeah, I was not down for it. It was giving me, again, like, trigger warning abuse a little bit, and I just didn't know why Ellie kept herself in the situation that she was in for as long as she did, other than obviously because she was lonely, which I think is a part of this, is that basically, like, we're starting off, she's 40, everyone she knows is basically with somebody apart from Nadine, who is happy, but Ellie is feeling lonely because her daughter has now moved out and is far away. She has a daughter who is about 18, 19 or something. Her parents obviously live quite far away. She doesn't really have much in the way of friends, it feels like. She feels very isolated because they're both so busy, they don't really get to see each other very much anymore. So she makes this new friend called Alice. And I loved their interactions. I liked how they met. I liked their storyline a lot, but I just feel like part of the reason why Ellie got herself into this other romantic relationship was because she felt lonely. And there was obviously an element as well of, like, it wasn't really the romance for her with this. It was more just that she was kind of having fun with it, which I don't hate. I hated that relationship, unfortunately. I did like the end. I was very happy with where the ending went. I just wish we had got there a lot sooner so we could have had better development for that, because it was very rushed and it felt like it was just very tacked on at the end. And given how that was the relationship I preferred, I'd have liked to have seen more of that than what we got basically in the book. So yeah, overall this definitely wasn't bad. I just had a lot of issues with it. I don't know if I'd reread it, because having to get through the whole romance stuff that we have in this, which I hate, was just not it, basically. So yeah, it was a choice that was made, I think, and I don't really agree with the choice, but I also was very happy for the final ending that we did get, even though unfortunately this book did leave a lot of plot threads just left, which was unfortunate. Like, there was a lot of there was too many plot threads going on, and I think, and there was just a lot that was never quite resolved by the end of the book. They were just kind of like put in there and then forgotten about, which was unfortunate. So yeah, a mixed bag of a book. I've given this a 3.25. I think it's certainly not the worst in the girls series. I think I would rate Girls in Love and Girls Under Pressure higher than this. And then I would say this one, and then I would say the two that I rated a 2-star, basically. Purely because of the really heavy romance we have in here that takes up so much of the book's plot line. If that wasn't in here, I would have rated this higher. I think this would be like more of a high 3, but yeah, but I did have a good time with it. I got emotional towards the end, definitely. There were definitely some emotional moments in this, particularly with regards to that someone in Ellie's family does end up going to hospital at one point, and that is quite worrying and upsetting. So yeah, trigger warnings for that as well, if that is not really something that you want to deal with, because it is a bit heavy there for a little while. Overall, I thought this was alright. It definitely wasn't like the brilliant book I was really hoping it was going to be after we've had such a long break, but I can see where Jacqueline was going with this, basically. And yeah, like, I've seen a lot of reviews where people are just saying, like, this is not Ellie in how she acts in this book, or like she's still basically got her 14-year-old brain, but I do think she's grown up, and she matured. So I wish we'd seen more of her daughter, honestly, because I feel there was so much interesting storyline that we could have got with Ellie being a single mother, but we kind of skip over that. I know it was kind of done because of the plot, in that it just heightens Ellie's loneliness because we don't really see much of Lottie, who's her daughter. But yeah, overall, it wasn't the worst. It's not my favourite Jacqueline Wilson book, but I think it's going to sit there somewhere in the middle, which I'm not mad about. And in true Ellie Allard fashion, I've decided to do a list of the top 10 things I hated and loved about this book, because it felt like perhaps a better Spark Notes than what I may be giving you now. So, the list. Okay, so without further ado, here we have the 10 things I hate the most about Think Again. Number 1, not seeing enough of Magda and Nadine. They felt so distant for the course of this story, which was a real shame. They got barely any page time, it felt like, and given the fact that they're here on the front cover, basically you would assume they would be more main characters, but they really weren't. Number 2, the secret admirer subplot. Everything about that was awful. It was a totally unnecessary plot line. It was just icky, and it didn't need to be there, so I hated that. 3, everything to do with Gary. That's all I'm gonna say. But yeah, everything to do with him. Number 4, Ellie having a really depressing 40th birthday. That was just really sad. Like, it got better during the day, but it was a pretty low point to the book, and if you know me, you know I'm not a fan of basically the protagonist being shat on at the start of the book and just being really depressed and in a bad position. I just find that as a really bad point to start a book in. So yeah, and also I just didn't want her to have a really bad 40th birthday. Number 5, Nadine's depressing subplots. Oh, Nadine, my girl deserved so much better. It's interesting as well because I was reading at the back in like the acknowledgements and stuff, and it's talking about how Jacqueline like decided to come back to the series, and part of it was because the actress who plays Nadine in the Girls series, the TV series, had approached her and was like, I'd love to see where they were gonna be, and like begged her to write more. So it's kind of sad that Nadine got a recycle plotline basically. And yeah, I didn't feel good at all about anything that happened in her plot arc. Number 6, lots of plot threads were not tied up. We just left a whole bunch all over the floor. Number 7, how long the thing with Gary took. So much of the book was devoted to that, and it was just repetitive. It was the same thing over and over again, and I'm just like, Ellie girl, get out of there. You're seeing the red flags. You're not even oblivious to this. You're just ignoring it. 8, Ellie calling herself old when she's only 40. No. Number 9, not enough Lottie. I thought the little we saw of Lottie was great, but we didn't see her very much, so I'd have liked more of that. Although I do understand why she wasn't there because of the plotline, but still, I'd have liked to have seen more of her, maybe some flashbacks, that kind of thing. Number 10, not gonna lie, we had so many cameos from different characters. Kind of would have liked to have seen where Dan ended up, because we did not see him. And I would have really liked for him to have had like this really like happy ending and be this really kooky nerdy dad, and we didn't get to see that, unfortunately. So yeah. Okay, on to the positives, however, because there were still a lot of things I loved about this book. So 10 things I loved about Think Again. Number 1, literally anything to do with Ellie's family, like all their subplots, and whenever they showed up were some of the real highlights of this book for me, which is not usually the case in the girls series, so that was a nice surprise. Number 2, getting to see the girls again, even if it wasn't quite in the capacity that I wish they were in, it was still great to see them again. Like the whole scene where the scene where all 3 of them are together, any of those scenes were still some of the best scenes in the book for me. Number 3, Ellie reconciling with her father, finally, after all these years. We really like went back a little bit to their past experiences, her grief over her mother, that kind of thing. And it makes it clear that her and her father never really fixed their relationship since that point. So it was nice to see them getting closer and really talking to each other. So that I really appreciated, and was something I didn't expect from this book, quite honestly. Number 4, the Elephant graphic novel. That was a nice storyline. I really liked it. Number 5, Alice. All I'm gonna say, but Alice was great, and I enjoyed the whole plot line. Number 6, Ellie actually being a really good high school teacher. That was like something that was a curveball that I did not expect to see, but she was actually like a great teacher. And just knew how to handle the kids, so I was impressed. I'm like, go Ellie. Not something I could do for sure. Number 7, this is a personal favourite of mine. So do you remember how much I hated Russell? Yeah, he cameoed quite early in, actually. I really loved seeing Russell be absolutely dunked on and wrecked by Jacqueline Wilson. She was absolutely vicious to him, and I loved every single minute of it. I was so happy. That was all the validation I got from me hating him so much, and what we saw of him in that book was beautiful. Number 8, Stella. She's this cute grey cat who's very moody, that belongs to Ella. Any book where the protagonist has a cat who she loves is always gonna win extra stars from me. Number 9, Egg's growing up to be an actually kind of brilliant brother and just an overall sweetheart. That was so unexpected and I loved it. And finally, number 10, another unexpected one, the return of Miss Henderson. So I don't think I ever mentioned her in my previous things, but she was basically this like narky PE teacher who did kind of like the girls and kind of helped them out at times. And we actually got to see her return, which was really nice. I wish she had been maybe more of the main plot line than the other person we got, but still it was very fun to see her again, and that was very nostalgic to me. So yeah, that I guess is my review, I think, again. Literally tomorrow I am off to go to the Jacqueline Wilson event, and I'm really excited to see her talk about this. I'm just excited to hear her talk in general. I've met her once before when I was very young, literally on the release of Dustbin Baby, which I'm guessing would be this year. So yeah, I don't know already what to expect, but I'm just looking forward to hearing her talk about the books. I'm looking forward to all the nostalgia, seeing all the people there who are big Jacqueline Wilson fans. I've no clue if she's doing a signing or not because she is quite elderly, so I don't know if she should be doing signings, but I'm taking all my books with me anyway because you never know, and it would be great to meet her. So this is kind of where I'm signing off, I guess, for this little vlog. This was a really nice experience for me. It was definitely not as much of a planned reading my favourites video as my last one was. I really just kind of pick up various ones here and there other than reading the girls series. But I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed revisiting a lot of this work. I enjoyed exploring a lot of the stuff that, you know, maybe didn't work for me back then and it kind of works now, which is weird, or finding the stuff that didn't work. I liked going back and watching some of the girls' TV show. I'd forgotten how much that series lived rent-free in my head back when it was airing. So yeah, it was been a really nice experience actually doing this, and yeah, I'm looking forward to doing more of these in the future. I definitely want to do more of these rereading my favourites. I'll probably stick again to like actual series rather than a whole author's like bookography. So I'm going to sign off here. You will probably see some footage at the end, which is just from the Jacqueline Wilson event. I may come in and say something as well about how it went, but I probably won't. I will just end this here, and I really hope you enjoyed this probably very long video by the time I get this edited and uploaded. Did you, also have really fond memories of reading the Jacqueline Wilson books? Please feel free to put that down below in the comments. I'd love to hear. Honestly, because, she really was such a big part of, like, my childhood. So I'd love to, hear about other people's stories about that, basically. As always, stay safe, stay cozy, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!
And write about sort of whatever I want, rather than worrying, will it traumatise the child? Jacqueline Wilson traumatized. Make the home a comfy place for your husband. And I mean, I'm embarrassed to tell you that when I got married, it was my job to do all the washing, all the ironing, all the cleaning, all the shopping, all the cooking, all the getting up at night for our daughter, everything. And this just was such, I think most modern women would actually be irritated by this state of affairs. And so I think it's a difficult one. I mean, I had lovely male friends, but somehow in my books, I mean, once I was talking about my children's books, and this dad who'd been valiant enough to take his daughter and her best friend and another girl all and sat there through it, and then he put up his hand at the end of the questions and said, "Can you tell me, are you ever going to put a nice dad in there?" And I thought about it carefully, and I thought that I'm being very, very prejudiced here. And so I have got nice dads, I have got nice men in my books. And even the guy that Ellie gets involved with in the book, he does try hard in some respects. He just goes about things the wrong way. Do you think that's fair?
I think that's fair, yeah.
Which ones are your favourites in terms of faithfulness to the material, but also for casting as well?
Right. I think of them all, and I've been very, very lucky with adaptations. I think The Illustrated Mum was amazing. I don't know if it's still on YouTube now. It is. I recommend it. I think Michelle Collins played Marigold, and she put her heart and soul into it. And she isn't like Michelle Collins playing Marigold, she becomes Marigold. And she was a wonderful actress, but the two girls playing Dolphin and Star gave amazing performances. And it actually, for some reason, went to America too. And bizarrely, it won some sort of award, the adaptation in America. And we all got to go for a freebie to New York, and it was being shown at the Museum of Modern Art. And Michelle was there with her then boyfriend, and I had my partner there, and it was just the most amazing fun. And I'm so glad that was absolutely got the recognition it deserved. With plays, Hetty Feather, I don't know if it ever came to Manchester, but I thought it was a wonderfully adapted play and with a wonderful director. And I did go and see that quite a few times. And it started off, it was in the West End for a while, which was amazing. And it started off in the Rose Theatre in Kingston, where I used to live. And how the cast loved it. Not when I came in, but when I came in with my partner Trish, because always, she would stand up at the end and cheer to my embarrassment. But then everybody else cheered, and it was amazing. So I think those two are the absolute highlights, but there have been many adaptations, and there isn't a single one that I haven't approved of. So there's supposedly going to be a children's series based on a book of mine called The Primrose Railway Children. That's, I think they've already made it for CBBC, but I don't know whether it will ever go out. I hope so. And there are mutterings about other projects, but I don't really know. I just sort of sit back and hope.
Thank you.
Thank you.